Hi everyone, this is BritSimon. So it's August 5th of 2022. And we're getting to the point where we need to have some realistic, sensible conversations about whether DV 2022 is over or not. Now, let me just start by saying DV 2022 is going to end on September 30th. Until that date, pretty much anything could happen. But let's be honest, not anything could happen. There's certain things that will obviously happen, right? And I wouldn't want to give people the impression that it's impossible that if you haven't got your 2NL for a case so far, that you cannot get your 2NL between now and September 30th, that your chances are completely over. But I also think it's important for us to be sensible and realistic, and particularly where people are perhaps going to be taking decisions about joining lawsuits or traveling to some location because they believe they can get an interview at some other embassy. I think that there are some reasons why people need to understand the realities of what's happened, right? And so it's in that sort of frame of mind that I wanted to sort of put some information out there for you so that you can understand what's going to happen in the next few weeks, and that you won't commit to making decisions that could cost you a lot of money, make commitments on your life in terms of moving a family to a new country, etc., because you want to be in some location. Ready for an interview. My heart absolutely broke. I think it was last year, perhaps it was the year before. I think it was last year, where a number of people, literally from Cuba, I remember this vividly because I just was horrified with what happened. A number of people moved to another country and literally camped outside another embassy. They left Cuba, they went to this other embassy, assuming that the embassy would take them seriously and would schedule their cases, etc. Assuming, that the embassy would care, and the embassy did nothing. And so these people were literally with their families camping outside an embassy, hoping that in some way they would be scheduled. And I just, it was heartbreaking because I tried at the last minute as well. I tried to sort of contact the embassy in a couple of different ways, both through Twitter and through other ways, but they wouldn't do anything, and it was heartbreaking to watch. So anyway, that's why I'm talking about this, right? And it's not because I want to be filling the airwaves with negativity. This is realism, not negativity. And if you don't understand the difference, I'm sorry. This isn't about, Simon's not being positive, and under God, anything could happen. And, I really want this, so it's going to happen. Come on, please. We're all grown-ups. Let's try and, talk about sensible stuff, not fairies living at the end of your garden who control your life. Okay. That doesn't exist. This is reality. Okay. So let me show you some numbers and explain what's happened. So actually, firstly, I should back up a little bit. In December of last year, the DV 2022 program was in big trouble. What had happened is that the government stopped processing cases in DV 2022 between the end of May, about May 25th or May 27th, I can't remember the precise date, and September, the end of September, they stopped work on DV 2022. That means they created a massive backlog of cases that were unprocessed. They had the document procedure in place in the up until December 9th, which just complicated the whole processing. And it was very obvious they were about to screw up the whole year. On December 9th of last year, they announced the pilot program, and they didn't announce a lot of details, but slowly over the period of the last few months since December, we've pieced together what the pilot program was about. the first most visible aspect of the pilot program was that they no longer did the document procedure. And then at various times, we've all tried to work out, are they scheduling by DQ date or AV date, as it became known? Were they scheduling by case number? Some people idiotically to this day still talk about DS submission date as being important. It never was important. Please understand that, because I'm just fed up to my back teeth about discussing why that's not an important date. But the day, what we know now today is that their pilot program moved into a situation where they had established queues individually for each of the embassies. And they moved cases into an AV status into a queue for each of those embassies. And in some embassies, the queue was basically non-existent because there were not many people at that embassy. And in other embassies, the queues were very long. Some embassies steadfastly just were determined to not schedule cases. Accra is an example of that, for example, where they scheduled so few cases, it was a joke. They just actually scheduled about 39 cases, I think, yesterday or in the last couple of days. So thank God they did that. But there's still less than 200 for the year in Accra, which was an absolutely disgusting performance. Other embassies just stayed closed. Sydney embassy closed because they were moving. I mean, there was all sorts of chaos, right? And the lawyers, God bless them, sued where they could, and in some cases achieved some results. So, for example, Jesse sued on behalf of the people assigned to the Sydney embassy, and all of those cases have now been scheduled, partly because Suva embassy stepped up and took some of those cases. I think because of pressure of the lawsuit and because they were just hearing about the vibes. At one point, there was one of the people in that lawsuit actually had a conversation by mail with Suva embassy fairly early on, and the selectee mentioned to the embassy that I had just done a video, and the embassy asked for the link to the video, talking about, for God's sake, someone do something to help these people in Sydney. And so, funnily enough, they were listening, and somehow Suva embassy, for example, stepped up and they did some good work. Other embassies such as Casablanca, Algiers, various embassies have done a tremendous amount of work. Actually, if I just look down the highlights, let's see, DRC has done tremendously well. Over 3,800 cases scheduled. Casablanca was good. Yaoundé, Cameroon did good. Algiers did good. Nairobi, Kenya came through late. Kathmandu did nothing for a very long time, and then all of a sudden scheduled 300 in 1 month, then 300 the next month, then nothing for 2 months. And then at the last minute, they scheduled nearly 1,000 cases all in 1 month. And so, in Kathmandu, eventually, after ignoring people for many months, suddenly scheduled all of their cases pretty much before the end of the year. Other good embassies I was just reading from Africa. Let me just scroll down to Europe and Asia. Yeah, so in Asia, Kathmandu is obviously a standout. They've scheduled 3,400 people in total. Amman's done pretty good. Ankara has done pretty good. Yerevan has done good. Islamabad, even though Pakistanis are not part of the DV program, very often, Islamabad has done good in that it's scheduled 800 people, but it's really strangely ignored people from Africa. Don't really understand that, why they did that. There's a lot of concern and even a potential lawsuit that Curtis is just starting about Iranians assigned to the Abu Dhabi embassy. And Abu Dhabi only did 483 interviews or has scheduled interviews for 483 people. So that's Asia. Let me just look at Europe. Yeah, Warsaw is the top post in Europe, followed by Frankfurt. Those two embassies, of course, took the brunt of the of the chaos happening in the Ukraine, thanks to Putin's idiotic actions. And so Uzbekistan has done reasonably well. They normally do. Tbilisi did, pretty good. Tirana, Albania, pretty good, and so on. So there have been some embassies that have done well. There have been some other embassies, as I mentioned. There was Accra, a nightmare. Oh, let me just find Egypt. Egypt's numbers. Cairo, Egypt, yeah. So they've scheduled 1,700 African cases, 1,700 African people, I should say, about 700 cases. Now, that sounds good, but it's actually low. Egypt is actually the main powerhouse in Africa in terms of the highest number of interviews scheduled normally, highest approval rates in Africa, and a large number of selectees. So 1,700 sounds good, but it's not good. They should have done a lot better. But they, for a long, long time, just, again, ignored everybody, right? Anyway, so that's the background about the embassies. There's been a tale of two situations. KCC, on the one hand, since December 9th, with the pilot program, have transformed their ability to actually schedule cases and process cases. And they process DS-260s very fast. Considering they had done none of that work for several months in 2021, from December 9th onwards, they then processed nearly, I think, over 100,000 cases. So they did a tremendous job of doing what KCC needed to do. And some of the lawyers are not going to like the way I'm phrasing this, by the way, because some of the lawyers particularly want to complain about how the government have done. The reality is KCC set out to change the DV process on December 9th. They changed what they could do centrally, and they made a tremendous difference, and they made very positive benefit. But there were some embassies that just stood stubbornly and said, no, we're not going to take the cases, right? Now, Curtis believes that was a decision made centrally. I don't think that at all. I think that was a decision made at those embassies. Accra Embassy, for example, I don't believe, and Curtis is going to try and find out, I believe, but I don't believe that there is going to be a cable he'll find where someone has said, hey, Accra, we're giving permission for all the other embassies to go and take as many cases as they can, but we want you to piss everyone off in Ghana because we think that's funny, or whatever the cable would say. I don't understand what that cable would say, but I don't think there was an instruction to Accra to say, ignore all the people in Ghana, please. I don't think that happened. I think it was a decision that was made at the post. And they can point out that they only had one member of staff or two members of staff or whatever they want to say. But frankly, there's no excuse, because we can see that they've done, they've done other types of visa processing. So for those embassies that ignored time-sensitive DV cases, that's unforgivable. But what KCC did was they said, okay, that embassy is not taking cases. We're going to schedule people elsewhere. So unfairly, yes, unfairly, people have been issued at other embassies whilst some embassies just let their people rot. And that's what's happened. So, as I say, KCC. Now, I've got many complaints over the last 2 or 3 years with KCC. And every time I read one of the declarations by Miles Morgan, I want to punch the wall, because he doesn't seem to understand what process he's in charge of. I don't understand why. Miles, if you're listening, come on, get a grip. You need to understand. But bless the staff at KCC. They've done the best they can, in a sense. They have done a good faith effort of scheduling as many cases as they could in the embassies that would accept them. Okay, so now where do we stand in terms of the numbers? Because this is really what you want to know about, or what you should want to know about. So let me just show you these numbers here. Okay, so I'm showing you there are two sites that we can get data from the SEAC database. One is Frank's site, which thankfully he scrapes every day. I always use the term scrape, and Zarthisius tells me off because I know the technology is different to screen scraping, but I still think of this as screen scraping, just in my old mind. Anyway, so Frank takes this data, extracts this data once a day. Zarthisius has just updated his data. I think he's doing this on Fridays now on an ongoing basis. Now, of the two sites, there are some differences in the numbers, and there is a reason for that. The Ready cases in particular, there's a difference there, and I can show you why here. On Zarthisius's site, there are 27,300 people who are ready, okay, and Frank has that same number as 29.7, right, 2,000 more. Well, the differences are, you can see here, for example, this is the file that comes from Zarthisius, and here are some cases which are refused. They are not AP cases; these are final refusals, but they have some of the family members are in different statuses. So, for example, on this case, there's one person in a refused status, which would be the main applicant, and there's one person, a derivative, in ready status, right? Now, that person in who's the derivative cannot possibly be issued, because if the main selectee has been refused, then frankly, the case is done. There's no chance of that derivative being issued, right? Same thing here. The main case has been refused, but there are two derivatives that are marked as ready. So in Frank's site, he's got all of these sort of people in ready status. He's added them up, and so it appears that there are more ready people than actually there are. Some of those cases are just not going to be updated. The embassy didn't update the derivatives when they updated the main selectee to refuse status. And there's a lot of those. There's over 1,000. There's about 1,000 of those in refuse status. There's a similar thing in AP status. And so, as I look at the data, I tend to use Frank's data because it comes on a daily basis, and I trust the numbers from Zarthisius's website a little bit more because I understand and have worked with him in the past in terms of building an understanding about how to make the decisions to apply the logic to say, if the case is refused, then the derivatives are refused as well, right? There's that sort of thing going on. There's some logic going on in Zarthisius's site that Frank is not applying yet, okay? So, but both sites agree on a couple of things, and it's these numbers I wanted to sort of try and get over to you. So, both sites show that there are about 31.3K of issued visas, right? 31,354 is the number that shows on Zarthisius's site, and 31,362 is what Frank is reporting. So a slight difference there, but no big deal. That's it's about 31.3K visas issued, and that's a reliable number. This comes from the SEAC database. It ties very well with declarations that come out from Miles Morgan and others, and Brenda Grew, who are the people at KCC that sort of track all these numbers, right? So we know that these numbers are accurate. I'm certain of it. I've been watching this for years. Okay. And what I want to talk about is how many people are issued, plus how many people are scheduled in August and September, since we're at the beginning of August, right? Now, the number is 27,337. That number includes no-shows from previous months. So I did a little thing the other day where I took the SEAC file from Zarthisius's site, and I used the data to see which cases are marked as ready, but they had their 2 NLs in January, February, March, April. I think I just include those months, right? January, February, March, and April. April cases would have been scheduled for June, right? April would have been June interviews. So if they're marked as ready today, but they had a June interview, then then that's a no-show. Same thing as if they had a May interview or an April interview, right? So those 2NLs from January, February, March, April, and January, February, March, and April that still show ready are no-shows, right? And that adds up to 3,400 people. So there are 3,400 people that show as ready, but they're not real cases. They're not actually going to ever turn up for their interview now. They just decided not to turn up. So we can take this number down to 24,000. That's 24,000 people who are currently scheduled for interview in August and September. And that ties up with the number of 2NLs that we've seen released. There were about 15,000 people scheduled for August. And amazingly, they've scheduled about 10,000 people for September. They've scheduled almost 2,000 cases in the last few days. There was a declaration that was made over the weekend, last weekend, that said we're going to schedule at least 1,200 cases, and lo and behold, yet they did nearly 2,000. Right, so there's been a lot of activity. An extra 4,000 people or so have been scheduled this week in the last few days. And so that's made quite an impact to the number of people scheduled for September. And so now, if we take this ready number, we take off the people that I'm convinced are no-shows, that takes us down to 24,000, right? And of the 24,000 people, roughly 20% will be either no-shows, or they'll be there could be no-shows from July cases, right? There'll be some of those, and there'll be 20% of people will be refused in August and September, or they'll be put on AP, or there'll be no-shows, right? So roughly 20%. So that means we'll get between 19 and 20,000 visas issued from the 24,000 people scheduled in the next 2 months, right? In August and September. Now, 20,000 people added to the 31.3 is going to take us to about 51,000, right? In addition to that, a declaration the other day said that KCC have sent 708 cases, I think the number was from memory, to USCIS, which is adjustment of status cases. That's people who were in America already on some sort of non-immigrant visa and adjust status in the USA from a B1, B2, from an F1, whatever it might be. And so those cases, about 708 cases, will go through, and largely speaking, they'll all go through. They'll be processed in time because AOS cases tend to go pretty quickly on DV, not in any other type of adjustment of status, but for DV, the field offices accelerate the cases tremendously. And so they will pretty much all be processed. Most of them will be issued. And so I reckon we'll probably get about 1,400 issuances from AOS cases this year. So if we take the 20K I'm saying could come from the ready cases, and the 31.3 from the issued cases, that takes us to 51.3 plus 1,400. That's 52.7, right? 52,700 is that number, and then we've got 6,900 people currently in AP. And some of those cases are going to be issued during August. And you'll find that wherever possible, the AP cases tend to get issued in August and September. However, if you can do any sort of math, you can see that we're already starting to run out of visas, right? If we've got 52.7 and 6,900 people in AP today, there are not going to be enough visas for all of the people in AP, even if all of them got cleared tomorrow, right? That's what I'm telling you. And so there will be, and I could be slightly overestimating the 20K. Let's say it's 19K. Maybe we're at 52,000, 51,500. I mean, something in that range, right? But there is not going to be, a lot of visas left. Now, KCC will prioritize new scheduled cases above AP, right? Which is a bit unfair because the AP cases have paid their money, they've had their medicals, they've had their interview, etc. And often, through no fault of their own, they're going to be they're just going to be on AP. But largely speaking, KCC will use as many of the new scheduled cases as they can. But there will be cases, luckily, by scheduling 15,000 people in August, the refusals from August can be turned into new visas for the AP cases in September, right? So there will be probably a couple of thousand of the AP cases will get issued, mainly in September. Some of them in August, right? Maybe, and it could be as many as, let's say, 3,000 maximum. But what I'm trying to say is that we're at the position where pretty much all of the visas are spoken for, right? Now, I'm not saying that they couldn't issue some more 2NLs on Monday next week or Tuesday, a few more, right? But if you're thinking they're going to issue another 1,000 2NLs, no, they're not. They're not going to do that, right? There just aren't enough. There aren't enough visas to be issued. Much of the numbers that I'm talking about here is assuming that cases will be refused. That's a normal assumption. That's something that normally happens, but it's not, strictly speaking, something that KCC can do, right? So from their perspective, they are saying, okay, we've got about 24,000 cases, and they probably know that number is a little bit lower. Let's say it's about 23,000 cases. They're adding 23,000 cases to the cases they've got. And so they're saying, yeah, we've got, we're staying below the 55,000 number. In reality, some of those cases will be refused, and that's how some of those AP cases will be satisfied. But they must be pretty close on the 55,000 target right now, okay, already, right? Because unless there is a large number of no-shows that we don't know about in July, they've got to be close to these numbers I'm talking about here. So I don't think we're going to see a lot more 2NLs now between now and the end of the year. Now, a couple of lawsuits might succeed. There might be some mandamus lawsuits that might succeed, etc. Curtis has got a big group case which has over 1,000 cases still not satisfied. That looks risky to me. I don't know where those visas are going to come from, even if Curtis were able to win the case. Although I suspect we're about to see a judgment, or at least a comment from the judge on that any day now, because things are about to happen on that case. So, the lawsuits are starting to look a bit at risk. I say a bit at risk. They're very much at risk, simply because the visas are drying up anyway. So even if the lawsuits are well argued and well reasoned and totally justified, if the visas are all gone, the visas are all gone. There's nothing left to reserve. There's nothing left to prioritize for a lawsuit that is won in late August or something. That's just too late at that point, right? So there you go. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. I'm trying to explain that pretty much the visas are spoken for in large terms. I'm not saying we might not see a few more. I just want to stress this point. There could be a few more, but there's not going to be high volumes of 2NLs sent out at this point. I think we've seen the majority of the 2NLs by far. I think we've seen, frankly, most of them that they plan to send out. We also, we've seen at least one embassy who has responded to people saying, where am I? We've seen one embassy that has responded to people by email saying they're not taking, I can't remember which embassy it was now, but that they're not taking any more cases, that they have filled all their slots for September. So that's the other side of the coin. One is KCC and the visa office. Do they have any visas left? And the other side of the coin is, has the embassy got any space left, right? And at the moment, if an embassy came forward and said, okay, I've just found that I've got an extra 20 visa interview slots available on this day, on September 23rd or whatever date it might be, they could take a small number like 10 or 20 or whatever. But if an embassy came back and said, "Hey, I can take 500 more people," there probably aren't 500, or 1,000 visas to go fill those spots anyway, right? So now we've got embassy capacity issues and visa availability issues. Okay. So going back to what I said at the beginning of the video, I'm trying to get across to you. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to ruin your dreams or anything like that. I just want to make sure that if you're about to make certain decisions that involve traveling or spending money or whatever, that you do that with full knowledge available to you, which is you can go and look at these numbers yourself and decide what this means in your mind, right? I've got some history, some understanding of what this really means. I'm applying that thinking to these numbers, and although it's not as bad as some people might assume, because it appears that we've got 69,000 or 70,000 people, scheduled for interviews. That seems odd. But we know that the refusals have already happened, that AP cases lose their visas, and there's no shows, right? So by working out the math and starting with the issued and the ready cases, we can work to the position where we say, okay, we know they're going to, with what they've done already, with the cases they've scheduled already, they're clearly going to issue at least 50,000 visas, probably more than that, probably 51 or 52,000 visas, and some AP cases will probably fill up the gaps up to close to the limit. So they're going to get very close to the limit, and as I said earlier, which is not going to be a popular statement, but credit where credit is due, KCC set out to fix a problem. It was a problem they created through their own processes, through their own work methods, etc. But fix the problem they did, right? They turned the program round, and literally in all of the time that I've been looking at data, I've never seen a year that has had this many visas issued. I mean, they turned this around in a very short time period, really. It's been very unfair to a lot of people, no doubt about that. Very unfair to some people. Some people, with very low case numbers, you could be sitting there with Africa 100 or something, and if you're in Ghana, unfortunately, you're sitting there waiting to be interviewed still because of the unfair situation, and you're not going to get interviewed. So basically, if you don't already have your visa scheduled or your interview scheduled, the chances for you to get that are very, very slim now. The other thing that people might ask, by the way, is will the visas run out before I get my interview? Now, I have seen one country, Iran, that during 1 year they reached their numerical 7% cap, which is it's not a quota, it's a cap. And because of that, there were visa interviews cancelled in that 1 year. I think it was 2013, DV 2013. Just from memory, it may have been, it must have been DV 13. Couldn't have been 12, because 12 had other issues. So it was about that time, and they cancelled some interviews. However, I don't think that will happen this year at all for any countries, because A, we're not near any caps, any 7% caps, and B, when they schedule the interview, they allocate visas to that case as they schedule it. Okay, so and those will have priority. The AP cases that clear between August and September have to take the leftovers, right? So the cases that are given priority are the newly scheduled cases. So I believe there is literally no possibility of you turning up for your interview and finding that there is no visa place for you. There would have to be a massive mistake on behalf of KCC if that were to have happened, right? So I mean, I can't say it's completely impossible, because I don't know the complete inner workings and how they could have made some sort of mistake, but I really don't think it's going to happen. I'd be very, very surprised. So if you've got a visa interview scheduled, then you're okay. However, for God's sake, go to the interview properly prepared. Don't go there thinking, my mate told me not to bother filling in an I-134 because I've heard it's never used at this embassy. If you go there with that mindset, you're a bloody idiot, right? You need to get to the interview, or another one that often comes up. Oh, well, I've got a degree, so I don't need to take along my education certificates for my secondary education, my high school. Another classic one. Badly informed people go to interviews all the time with missing documents, like they don't have the proper education stuff, they don't have an I-134 prepared, they don't have police certificates from each of the countries that they should have had, and so on and so forth. They miss out on documentation, right? Please don't do that, because if you get yourself into a situation where you've caused yourself to be put on AP, you are literally risking your chances of a green card, okay? Because your allocated visa is good for the month that you're scheduled in, but it drops at the end of the month. So if you have a scheduled interview in August, and let's say you're scheduled on August 25th, but you forgot your education certificates, right? You may run straight home and forward them to the embassy the very next day, but for whatever reason they don't look at those until the beginning of the following month. Unfortunately, that means that your allocated visa would have been taken away from your case and returned to the pool, which means you're in the same mess that everyone else is going to be in terms of AP cases searching for visas, right? So you don't want to put yourself in that position. You also don't want to have, just make sure, just please make sure you go to the interviews properly prepared, all of your documents in good shape, nicely prepared in a nice order. Go through it, double check it, treble check it, have somebody else check it. Go through all of your documents and think carefully. Read the bloody instructions. Don't ask me what documents you need to be taking to your interview. Have a think. Read the instructions. All the documents are there, but they vary for each case, right? I can't give you a list of the documents you need to take because I don't know whether you've been married before, or whether you had a child that died, or whatever is your individual circumstances, I don't know, right? So I don't know all of the documents that you're supposed to have taken. So have a read. Make sure you've got all the police certificates that you need. Make sure you've got your passport. Make sure you've got your education documents, your financial documents for if you're going to show bank statements or if you're going to show an I-134. Make sure you're properly prepared. It's absolutely essential, please. I don't want to hear anybody that listens to my channel going to an interview not properly prepared, okay? Not in August, please. Not in September, please. Don't do that to yourself. It would be a horrible thing that you'll never forgive yourself for if you don't prepare properly for your interview. Make sure you've read the instructions. Okay. I think that's all I wanted to cover. Sorry to talk tough to you, but it's out of love. It's like a parental love, Sometimes your parents are going to give you a bit of a stern talking to. That's how I feel sometimes with some of you guys. I feel like I have to talk fairly tough to you. So that's where it comes from. It's out of love, I promise you. All right. So that's the numbers. That's the situation. By all means, I'm sure people are about to argue with me about what I've said. Feel free to argue with me if you think I'm wrong. But I'll be publishing this video in a few minutes. I've already discussed this on one of the channels that I go on Telegram, but I wanted to make sure I get this out to a wider audience so that more people can be aware. Okay, hence the video. I hope this was helpful. We're almost at the end for DV 2022, but DV 2023 is starting. So, the first interviews for DV 2023 will be in October. So if you're a DV 2023, please do make sure you're subscribed and that you're listening to the information I've got for you. And I've got some other videos I need to release over the next few days. So please stay tuned to the channel and make sure you're watching. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye now.